The spring pole toggle snare is a great option for when you want to kind of upsize your game choices. You can get anything from a squirrel upwards of even a raccoon-sized animal with this. It's also a very highly efficient type of snare, and if you go set anywhere from 5 to 10 of these, which they only take about 20 to 30 minutes tops to build once you get proficient at it, and you can definitely expect that if you set them in the right areas that you will be bringing home some meat back to the camp. For your trap parts for this snare, you're going to need about 6 different types of sticks. The first stick is basically just a stake with a branch off to one side of it, and you're going to need 2 of those. And we're going to drive those into the ground. Then you're going to need a straight post. You're going to need a toggle stick, and this is what your snare will actually attach to. You're going to need a bait stick and a crossbar. First thing we've got to do is take our stake with the branch off to one side and pound it into the ground with our axe or a rock if you don't have an axe, and you don't need an axe to make this trap. Then do the same thing on the other side with your second stake. All right. Then you take your normal straight stake, kind of measure the distance. And then go ahead and pound that in. After we get our stakes pounded in, then we've got to pull our spring pole down, and I'm going to take a little bit of bank line. You could use paracord or whatever. And I'm just going to tie this off to the top with a simple just overhand or square knot. And it's a good idea to, leave something at the end that would prevent this from flying forward or loosening up, such as these little branches I've left. And then I'm going to measure the distance. And so I'm going to cut it off about right here. Now I'm going to tie my bank line to my toggle I created here, and I made a small notch so that the cord would set in it and not come loose. Once I get my toggle tied onto my bank line, then I'm going to come up a few inches from my toggle and I'm going to make a loop. The type of loop that I tied in the bank line is called an alpine butterfly loop, and that's a permanent style of loop knot. There's a lot of other stuff out there that you can use as well, but that's what I prefer. Then you're going to measure your bait stick and then just trim it to length. When you're selecting your snare wire, there's a lot of options out there. If you can find some, this is basically picture wire hanger. If you can find some that's colored, that's fine, but this is a silver color, and 90% of the animals that you catch on these types of traps, you're going to catch them nocturnally, and most of them are colorblind, so it's really not that big of an issue. Once we get it set, then we're going to add our wire. And this can be done with cordage just as easily, but you have a much higher percentage of actually keeping your game once you catch it if you use wire versus your bank line. I'm just making a loop, connecting it to the existing loop. Then I'm going to measure the length. And I'm going to make a long enough snare to go plenty wide around this. The next step after we get our snare attached to our loop and size it correctly, then we take 4 small sticks, and all I did was take my knife, jam it into the end of them, and make a split so that we can have a spot for the snare to rest. And that's going to keep it up off the ground so that when the animal comes up and approaches the bait stick here, we're sure to get a head hold versus a body hold or something like that, because if it's drooping down to the ground, it might miss the animal. As we mentioned with the previous trap, both Josh and I really like to carry peanut butter in our any kind of kit that we carry, because it's such a calorie-dense food, and everything in the woods absolutely loves it. So, you know, not only does it feed you, but it's going to get you more food in the future without having to carry a bunch of weight. So I'm just going to grab this to make sure that I don't accidentally set the trigger off. And I'm going to smear it all over the bait stick. Smaller animals such as rats and field mice will definitely come up and you know, they're much more finicky than something like a rabbit or a possum, and they'll actually try to kind of lick the bait off the trigger without setting it. So after I get the bait smeared on here, then I'm going to sensitize the trigger by just barely putting it on the edge so that even if a field mouse was to grab it, it would trigger it. The animal's going to approach from either this side or this side. They're going to see the bait stick, hit the trigger. So the snare is going to grab the body of the animal or around the neck. And it's important to remember that you want the snare to come up high enough up off the ground so that the animal's feet won't touch once you've got it caught. Another good reason to carry wire like this is in a lot of places, especially out of season, it is illegal to carry commercial snares. And the downside of commercial snares is that they tend to have a one-time use, because once the animal gets into one and wrangles around, it'll tend to kink up that braided line and you won't be able to use it again. But with picture wire, you can keep using it over and over and straighten the wire out, even if the animal messes it up. So it has multiple uses, and you're not going to get in trouble for carrying something illegal in your backpack. One of the things you need to be concerned about with safety with this type of trap is because this is on such a tight spring pole and we have this toggle here. If you were to prematurely set this off and have your face somewhere in this area, that toggle could come up and pop you in the eyeball. That could cause great damage. So you want to make sure that you're always out of the way when working with this trap.